Sample 7 is an eased seam. You're going to cut one of the smaller pieces and one of the larger pieces. You're going to make sure you clip your notches no more than an 1/8 inch deep on both pieces. If you notice on the longer piece, you have this text here that says ease, and it has the length of what will be eased. We're going to fit this seam into this seam without any gathers. You see this mostly with sleeve caps in jackets and shirts, and it allows you to give a little more shape. So this is the sample that we'll begin with. You're going to cut these pieces. You want to make sure that you overlock your edges before we begin. So I have my smaller piece with my notches marked. I've marked them instead of clipping just so that you can see them easier on the video. And on my longer piece, I know I'm going to have to fit between here and here into the smaller piece without any puckers or pleats. So in order to do that, I need to stitch a basting stitch on my longer piece between those notches. I'm going to use a number 4 stitch, a basting stitch, like we did on our sample, on sample 4. And I'm going to use 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I am going to baste. Remember, when you're basting, you do not need to lock your stitch. So I've done my basting stitch, and I have my threads. The threads are important here. I'm going to turn it over, and this is my bottom thread, which is my bobbin thread. Okay, I'm going to pull on just one end, only on the bottom thread, flipping it over. And if I pull, I can gather that ever so slightly, and I can distribute that fullness across. If I turn over on the other side again, at the other end, only on the bottom thread. If you pull the top thread, it actually locks the stitches in place. And I'm going to, again, I'm going to pull very slightly, and I'm going to distribute. You can see that there's a little tension there, but there are no gathers, there's no puckering or pleating there. And I'm going to then match that to my notches, and I'm going to pin that in place. Now that I've created the ease that I want to fit into the smaller piece, I'm going to pin notch to notch on the smaller to bigger part on both pieces. I'm going to put another pin right in the center notch. And remember, when you're pinning across the seam, not with it. Now I have my piece in place, and I'm ready to stitch. I'm going to go and I'm going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but I'm going to change my stitch length to a 2.5, which is a permanent stitch. I'm going to lock the stitch in place at the beginning and the end. When you're finished stitching, you're going to overlock your eased side and the top side together as one. You'll press this up toward the top, away from the eased piece. Flip it over, and you can press gently again. And when you look at this, you can see that it's truly eased. You can see the ease, the extra here. However, if you look closely, there are no puckers and there are no pleats. It's just the ease that shapes over whatever piece you're making it for.